We pulled our boats out of LFA 35. We're unable to move our lobster, which is very unfortunate.
Tonight, a temporary halt to the Mi'kmaq lobster fishery in an attempt to lower tensions in Nova Scotia.
The land health, the animal health, and human health has to be treated as one.
And we look at a movement in the Yukon that thinks a holistic approach might make the world healthier. Good evening, welcome to APTN National News. I'm Melissa Ridge, and we start out in southwestern Nova Scotia. Sipekne'katik First Nation cannot sell their commercial lobsters now, and Chief Mike Sack turned down his invite to the House of Commons. Instead, he's filed an injunction. Angel Moore brings us this.
Chief Mike Sack has called off the Sipekne'katik commercial fishery and has filed an injunction calling for the RCMP to enforce the law, due to continuous violence and threats by non-Indigenous fishermen and no buyers for the lobster.
We pulled our boats out of LFA 35. We're unable to move our lobster, which is very unfortunate. The industry has us locked out, so in that situation, our two big commercial vessels are heading out to the Sauniaville Wharf to protect our people and to ensure their safety.
Sipekne'katik First Nation launched their moderate livelihood fishery a month ago, which was met with violence from the non-Indigenous fishermen who say the lobster stocks are at risk. The Mi'kmaq have a treaty right to hunt, fish and gather to earn a moderate livelihood, which was upheld by the Supreme Court of Canada in 1999, known as the Marshall Decision. Regardless of the backlash, Levi Paul Sr. is still fishing a moderate livelihood.
And we're going to continue it. We're not going to stop. We've been here first, we'll be here last. And I can guarantee you, Sipekne'katik is not going anywhere. We're here to stay.
Chief Sack was invited to appear before the House of Commons Standing Committee on Fisheries and Oceans to discuss how to implement Sipekne'katik Moderate Livelihood Fishery Plan, which he declined.
It's just not a good time. You know, our community's in crisis. We have lobsters we can't move. Our band members are extremely frustrated. It's just enough the right time for me to sit around and talk about this. We're actually here. We're going to make it happen on our own if that's the case, and I expressed that the whole way.
Chief Sack hopes to be closer to finalizing the Moderate Livelihood Fishery Management Plan later this week. Angel Moore, APTN National News, Digby, Nova Scotia.
Incredible work by Angel Moore over the last few weeks. RCMP Commissioner Brenda Lucki gave her press conference today in Ottawa concerning the Mi'kmaq lobster crisis. She was repeatedly questioned on what many view as weak police response to violent acts. Jamie Pashagumskum has more.
Commissioner Lucki was adamant when asked if she thought the RCMP failed to protect Mi'kmaq fishermen.
Absolutely not. I have full confidence in the highly trained officers on the ground. They're well trained to de-escalate. They're well trained in crisis intervention. And I have full confidence in the command structure and the management structure.
Lucki said RCMP officers were not standing by and weren't always present when the violence and arson occurred. But she said from now on, anyone who breaks the law will be held accountable.
I have to tell you, the members have been, and including our divisional liaison teams, have been working tirelessly to maintain a peaceful environment and to help with a peaceful resolution to this conflict.
Lucki denied numerous times that the RCMP are failing in their duties. She said the individual that torched a Mi'kmaq person's van last week has been charged, as well as the person who attacked Sipekne'katik Chief Mike Sack. She said the person was not immediately apprehended because officers lost him in the crowd. Lucki also says her mandate is modernizing the RCMP.
We are co-developing with Indigenous and racialized communities an anti-racism training that will be mandatory for all communities. We've introduced the blanket exercise at the training academy. We've done a lot of work towards reconciliation.
In terms of keeping peace in Nova Scotia, Lucki adds that there are adequate forces on the ground, and she will deploy more officers if needed. Jamie Pashagumskum, APTN National News, Ottawa.
The leader of Cape Breton First Nation says in the midst of all of this, his community is planning to create its own self-regulated lobster fishery.
This is a huge step for us in our community. Long after each of us are gone, our great-grandchildren will fish the offshore waters of Nova Scotia.
Member 2 Chief Terry Paul says that his band is currently planning a moderate livelihood fishery similar to the one operating on Nova Scotia's southwestern shore that sparked fierce opposition from non-Indigenous harvesters. He doesn't provide a specific date, but says it will be soon. Support for Mi'kmaq fishers in Nova Scotia continues to spread across the country, with organizers from Idle No More calling for a national week of action to support the fishers. Today in Winnipeg, a solidarity event was held with horse spirit riders and Indigenous leadership. Brittany Hobson was there.
The solidarity event for Mi'kmaq fishers was organized by several Indigenous organizations in Manitoba. The day started at RCMP headquarters in the city, where leaders and horse spirit riders smudged and blessed the horses that joined in the solidarity event. The riders and then leadership marched from RCMP headquarters to the legislative building, where they were greeted by about 150 supporters. 10-year-old Mark Sweeney was one of them. The young Cree boy had this message for Mi'kmaq.
If you're Mi'kmaq, fight for your nation and always stick up.
Non-Indigenous people were also there to support Mi'kmaq fishers.
Canada doesn't get to be Canada without respecting the treaties. The treaties allow Canadians to be here and exist on this land in kinship on land that isn't theirs. And so not respecting this part of the bargain is just so profoundly ignorant and misinformed and unjust.
Indigenous people need protection, and they're not seeing that at all from the RCMP.
The crowd heard many impassioned pleas from leadership. Manitoba Kuwitanawi Ogimaganaka Grand Chief Garrison Settee said the events that are happening on the East Coast are an attack on treaty rights.
The Aboriginal treaty rights are constitutionally protected under Section 35 of the Constitution of Canada, and today Canada has broken their own constitution by failing to intervene in the protection of our people in Nova Scotia. That is not acceptable, and we will not stand for it here in Manitoba.
And AFN Regional Chief Kevin Hart called on the European Union to boycott all imports of lobster from non-Mi'kmaq fishers.
The European Union purchases $175 million of Canadian lobster each and every year. We're going to now tell them to make sure that if they purchase lobsters in the future, that they're certified Mi'kmaq lobster.
All leaders urged the federal government and RCMP to put an immediate end to what they're calling acts of domestic terrorism against the Mi'kmaq. Brittany Hobson, APTN National News, Winnipeg.
Thanks, Brittany. We want to hear what you think about halting the sale of Mi'kmaq lobster as a response to the violence against them by non-Indigenous commercial fishers. Here's how you can share your thoughts. You can send your emails to news@aptn.ca. You can leave a comment on aptnnews.ca. You can also follow APTN News on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube, and you can share your comments on those platforms. A First Nation in Northern Ontario that has been under the longest boil water advisory in Canada now has no water at all. And despite the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic, the chief says officials with Indigenous Services Canada concluded that there was no public health emergency. Despite that, nearly 200 people are expected to be evacuated from the community by the end of the day to hotels in Thunder Bay, over 400 kilometers away. Sipekne'katik First Nation has been under a boil water advisory for 26 years. First Nations leaders in Northern Ontario say that people are facing dehumanizing conditions. They can't even bathe or flush their toilets. A water treatment plant was built in 2016, but there have been numerous failures at that system. An unknown substance was discovered on the surface of the water within the reservoir, leading to a complete shutdown of the system. Leadership is pleading with Prime Minister Justin Trudeau to take action. We've got to take a break, but there's lots of news still ahead, including this. Struggling to recover financially from the COVID pandemic.
Frustrated, a lot of plannings to make ends meet, and and do what I can to earn some money for family.
Unemployment in the Northwest Territories was already an issue before COVID-19, but when the pandemic hit, one not-for-profit in Yellowknife went into overdrive to help people out of work. Here's Charlotte Moore Jacobs with that story.
When Fred Nazo was laid off in October from his construction gig, he knew what to do.
A shortage of work, so now I'm applying for employment insurance.
And he knew where to go.
I lost my phone, so this is the only place I could go to get information about government and my service, Canada.
The doors to the Career Center in Yellowknife have stayed open the entirety of the COVID-19 pandemic. When Service Canada moved much of their support online, the Career Center became the only computer lab open in the city.
So we are seeing an increase of the unemployed job seeker, typically looking for opportunities, but at the same time requiring assistance to apply on employment insurance and any of the other emergency benefits, and then B, subsequent follow-ups with their bi-weekly reporting that's required.
Gordon Ross, manager of the center, says while government-backed financial relief is good, clients need direct assistance in application support.
Biggest challenge has been around the information dissemination. A simple example would be when an individual comes in and accesses our assistance to apply for a benefit, even knowing the previous CERB, the Canadian Emergency Relief Benefit, whether they even applied through Service Canada or CRA. Because that matters when they apply for their next benefit.
This year, the NWT has suffered 4,000 jobs lost. The service sector accounting for 80%, as tourism and retail sales have plummeted. Finance Minister Carolyn Wozniak told media the number of jobs in the territory is expected to return to 90% of pre-pandemic levels by the end of the year. But the quality of work may suffer.
Although we may have the same number of jobs and bringing us back up to that 90%, the quality of the job may not be the equivalent. So again, whether that's in pay or whether it's in the hours that are available.
Even before COVID-19, visits to the center had been increasing, with half of all visitors being Dene, many looking for job transitions and education as the mining sector winds down. For Fred Nazo, it's a challenging time.
Frustrated, a lot of plannings to make ends meet, and do what I can to earn some money for family.
While he doesn't know if he will be hired back at his old job, he'll press on.
I'm building a cabin, and then I cut woods during the winter time.
Charlotte Moore Jacobs, APTN National News, Yellowknife.
For many people, land is much more than water, soil, and trees. It's a living environment that sustains people, animals, and overall wellness. A group of health advocates in the Yukon say it's time for Western science to listen to Indigenous knowledge. Sarah Connors explains.
In 1914, Joe Copperjack's grandfather, Chief Jim Boss, took his people into the bush to get away from an influenza pandemic.
They stayed for at least 7 years to get away from the influenza that was hitting Whitehorse.
Now, Jack's hoping lessons learned from traditional teachings in history can be used to fight the diseases and environmental issues of today. A member of Ta'an Quachin Council, Jack is a proponent of One Health. One Health is an approach based on the idea that the health of the people is tied to the health of the land. The aim is to implement collaborative strategies between multiple sectors like health professionals, zoologists, and First Nations to fight diseases and benefit the health of all living things. Jack says the approach is similar to a First Nations way of thinking.
The land, health, the animal health, and human health has to be treated as one, which basically follows the same principle as First Nation laws of interconnectedness.
Collaboration is key when solving nature-based issues surrounding One Health. Australia recently just contributed $630 million to an Indigenous ranger program, and the U.S. Center for Disease Control uses a One Health approach by involving experts in human, animal, and environmental health when monitoring public health outbreaks. Jack says Yukon's wildfire department is also now looking at implementing a One Health land protector program for firefighters by having them be out on the land monitoring fires year-round.
They're interested in us designing a program that mixes strongly TK laws and principles that they can share with their firefighters.
For Jared Gonay, much can be learned about One Health's collaborative approach. Last month, he and Jack published a letter in the prestigious Science magazine advocating for a One Health approach to the pandemic by incorporating Indigenous knowledge. Gonay is a member of the Taku River Tlingit First Nation and says he's using One Health in his own PhD research on conservation, like how animals need to be included in decision-making.
If we're sitting on the table talking about grizzly bears, there'd be a metaphorical chair for grizzly bears at the table, and we try to consider what this decision means for grizzly bears.
Gonay says if there's more consultation with the natural world and Indigenous knowledge keepers, a solution for tackling health and environmental issues is possible.
That's going to create stronger decisions, I'd say. And then you start having that more respectful relationship with the world and hopefully less situations that we're in right now with the COVID-19.
Sarah Connors, APTN National News, Whitehorse.
Time for another break, but when we come back, highlights from today's In Focus, where we dug into the why that's underneath the Mi'kmaq lobster crisis. Some of what you hear might come as a surprise. Stay with us.
You can fish lobsters in the summer. There's no reason that you cannot fish them. But you have to take into account the scale of that fishery and the mortality on the lobster at a different time in their life cycle. But there's nothing inherently unsustainable about fishing in the summer.
Welcome back. It's now time for our photo of the day. This image captures some scenery near Banff, Alberta, as winter begins to appear. Thanks to Destin Batuzzi for this submission. If you want the chance to be seen as our photo of the day, you can send your pictures to share at aptn.ca. And we're not just into pretty scenery. Halloween is fast approaching. We'd love to see your decorations or your little ghouls and goblins all dressed up. They could be our next photo of the day. Well, now let's take a look at tomorrow's weather forecast. Off to the east coast, we got 15 in showers for St. John's, 19 in rain for Halifax. Inukjuak, snow and 2 degrees. Kuujjuaq, mixed sun and cloud, and 0. Saguenay, 7 in sunshine, same with Sept-Îles, 15 and sunny for Montreal. Toronto, rain and 12 degrees. Sault Ste. Marie, showers and 4. Kapuskasing, snow and 2. Big Trout Lake, 1 and snow. Norway House and God's Lake, both -1 and sunny skies, -2 for Thompson and Pucktawagan. 0 and snow for Winnipeg and Dauphin, -1 and snow for Brandon. Saskatoon and North Battleford, sunny and -5, snow and -5 for Regina. -3s for Uranium City and Stony Rapids and snow there. -6 and snow for High Level and Peace River, -5s for Fort Chip and Fort McMurray and snow. -6 with a mix of sun and cloud for Edmonton, -6 and sunshine for Medicine Hat. 10s for Vancouver and Victoria. Tofino's 10 and rain. -4 and sunshine for Prince George. -8 and sunny for Dease Lake. Whitehorse, -8, mix of sun and cloud. -12 and a mix of sun and cloud for Dawson City. Wauti and Yellowknife, both -5 and sunshine. -4 for Fort Simpson. Inuvik, -5 and snow. Paulituck and Tuck, both -3 and snow. Chesterfield, Whale Cove and Arviat, snow and -3 there. Same with Nunyat. Kenite, 0 and snow. Same with the Iqaluit, -1 and snow for Igloolik. We've all seen the headlines and troublesome videos of the terrorizing of Mi'kmaq lobster fishers, but what many of us don't understand is the why. Why all of this rage? Are lobsters really in danger of being overfished by a few Mi'kmaq making a moderate livelihood? And what even is a moderate livelihood? On today's In Focus, we tackled a whole bunch of those points you may have been wondering about all through this. Take a look.
But Mi'kmaq people know their treaties. They know their treaty rights. You can ask any Mi'kmaq person. It's part of cultural identity. It's a real source of pride. And so, and when you go down on the wharf, because I have been down to Saulniéville, there within the Mi'kmaq community that's there, people who are supporting and the people who are fishing, there is a lot of pride. It's just that when Mi'kmaq people assert rights, conflict follows, and that's what we're seeing play out now.
Not any one person can defy a moderate livelihood. I feel a moderate livelihood is different for each person. We are all treaty rights holders. So myself, I have 5 children at home, so I believe my moderate livelihood would be a little bit different than somebody who is maybe a single person or a couple with one child. Their moderate livelihood would be probably a bit different than my own. This is what we've been waiting for the past 21 years, is for it to be defined for everybody's understanding, for everybody's well-being. I can't defy that, just like I said, as we have to do this as a collective nation.
I mean, in Nova Scotia and Atlantic Canada generally, we've mostly chosen our seasons for economic reasons, in part so that different regions around the Maritimes can be part of providing the supply of hard-shelled lobsters. That's a more lucrative market, it's worth more. So that's what we've prioritized here. So the openings and closings when LFA 34, for example, which is where St. Mary's Bay is, when that closes in May, LFA 27 up in Cape Breton opens, and that's open from May to July. So we have these openings and closings in many regards, specifically to be able to provide a year-round supply of hard-shelled lobsters.
Right now, Nova Scotia is doing much better than it ever did before, and this is in part a function of conditions are improving here. And so lobster production in Nova Scotia is skyrocketing, and everybody's been doing better. But if you go back to about 2016, down in the St. Mary's Bay area, and you compare the landings to 2 years later, yeah, there was a dip down there. And people are concerned about lobster numbers whenever they go down because it has direct impact on the fisheries.
There's a cool moment from British Columbia's coast caught on video by National Geographic. These wolf pups were filmed in a remote location by researchers Christina Mittermeier and Paul Nicklin. They are now teaming up with Ring Coast Conservation Foundation to use these images in a fundraising campaign aimed at stopping wolf trophy hunting. Didn't even know wolf trophy hunting was a thing. Well, that is a wrap on your midweek news. I'm Melissa Ridgen. Thanks for joining me. And if you missed that In Focus, you need to catch up. There was tons of info and perspective from people directly involved. Go watch that whole episode on APTN News' Facebook page, or you can download it as a podcast at aptnnews.ca/podcast. Have a great night.